hurdle. There we go. Welcome everybody. Hi, nice to see you all. Don't intend to do a big spiel in terms of welcomes, other than just to say that we've had apologies from Councillor Terry Fox, who isn't able to join us today. On to item number 2, announcements. No announcements to make, except to acknowledge that this is the last meeting ahead of May's local elections, and we're going to have an opportunity to discuss progress on the last year, my first year in office, item number 17. The only other announcement was just to welcome Tom Bousfield to the team. Tom, do you want to just say hello?
Hello everyone. Yes, I joined on Tuesday of last week. I suppose the first thing is a request, please be patient with me as I get up to speed. I've joined from the Treasury, and hopefully I can be supportive to all of you in getting money from both the public and the private sector.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Item number 3, urgent items. Not aware of any urgent items. Nothing really urgent, no. Item number 4, items to be considered in the absence of public and press. None. Thank you very much. Item number 5, voting rights for non-constituent members. Steve Davenport to advise. No. Thank you. Item number 6, declarations of interest by individual members in relation to any item of business on the agenda. I know we have standing declarations of interest, but anything other than the standing declarations of interest? Yeah, usual things? No? Yeah, it's just the fact that you're here representing, your places, Okay, all right, bro. Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Item number 7, reports from and questions by members. None received in advance of the meeting. No. Item number 8, receipt of petitions. None received in advance of the meeting. Item number 9, public questions. None received in advance of the meeting. No, thank you. Item number 10, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of January 2023. Are members content that those are an accurate record? Any objections or changes? No? Fab. Thank you. In which case, on to item number 11. Sorry, Chair Gareth, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased today to present a balanced budget for financial year 23-24. The budget takes account of the decisions made in January to increase the transport levy by 2%, first transport levy increase in over 12 years. The reporting pack today includes multi-year forecasts and capital, treasury and reserve strategies. There's plenty of detail within the report, but I'll essentially summarise this with 5 key points. So there's a relatively large amount of money available in the new financial year that will support over 120 capital projects and over 10 revenue programmes of activity. So we continue to invest large amounts of money into South Yorkshire. We continue to support the bus network with funding made available through to July. At the point of setting the budget, there was no assumptions made around the continuation of government money for transport services in the new financial year. Now we have more detail, and that we'll be able to take more informed decisions. Inflation continues to impact our budget, particularly around the capital programmes, but also on pay and price inflation within the revenue budgets. But we're able to meet some of these pressures due to the strong performance in our treasury management position. So we continue to expect to make more money than we had forecast in previous financial years from the cash that we hold on deposit associated with our investment profiles. So that investment income is offsetting inflationary pressures, but we will need to take account of how that pans out into future financial years. In the medium term, the position is characterised by the need for continued levy increases to offset existing issues. And I'd also draw attention to the fact that from this financial year, we will become exposed to the revenue performance of the tram network. So I'm happy to take any questions at that point.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members? Ros, thank you.
Simply the exposure that we're going to have with the tram, how we're going to look to mitigate that exposure as we take it back in.
Yes, thank you. So we have, we're building a team, we're now quite advanced in that, to manage the transfer of the tram back to, the tram services back to MCA ownership. That team will also be charged with working up a strategy for minimising our cost exposure. A very large part of the current cost exposure relates to electricity prices as a result of the Ukraine war. So clearly that's the swing factor that we will need to keep managing. But part of the strategy will look at ways of managing the electricity costs. And we will also be looking at frequency, the issues about overlap in services, possible cost savings that might be possible in the network. So we will be picking up every single stone to make sure we are managing cost as effectively as possible.
So with that, when do we expect to see a timeline that will actually identify and how it's going to be projecting, so it's open and transparent, and the effects on the whole of the Mayoral Combined Authority?
So I would expect us to be coming back to you with an action programme for managing costs by the end of the summer.
And what sort of timescale are we thinking about on that, in terms of the length of that programme to get costs presumably into a break-even position ideally, or even profitability?
Well, I don't want to sort of prejudge the work, because that's exactly what the work will be looking at. Given the exposure to electricity prices as being a key factor in the loss that will come to the MCA, we have a base forecast which does assume that loss progressively declines over the next handful of years as electricity prices perhaps don't return to pre-COVID levels, but return to a much lower level than we've experienced in the last few months. But we need to work through, so we can present an action programme with clear milestones for getting to an acceptable position.
But the tram, the tram, if I can say it, was loss-making prior to the Ukrainian war and increase in electricity prices, wasn't it?
We believe it was. Of course, that was an exposure for Stagecoach, but it was a much lower level than we've experienced in the last, or that they are experiencing in the last few months. And of course, the last 2-3 years has been completely distorted, most recently by Ukraine and electricity prices, but before that by COVID. So actually, it's now 2-3 years since we've experienced business as usual.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. If I could also add to that, Steve Ros. We are later today beginning to talk about Transport 2030 plan, business plan, which is something over the last 12 months we've discussed needing that medium to long-term approach to public transport. So just a quick comment that we'll also need to set it within the context of that and have that medium to long-term view, which in the past we haven't had.
Okay, thank you. So the proposed budget provides resourcing totalling £387 million to enable the delivery of the MCA's capital and revenue programme and our core activity. So therefore we approve the adoption of the revenue and capital budget estimates for the year, approve the reserve strategy and approve the treasury management strategy. Everybody agreed? Yeah. Fab. Okay, all right, brilliant. Thank you, Gareth. On to item number 12, please. Dissolution of South Yorkshire Passenger Transport Executive from Steve. Just to summarise, SIPT is being legally dissolved with effect from 31st of March, with those powers then vested in the MCA. So we need to change our constitution and update that to reflect the dissolution. So Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair said, this report relates to the dissolution of SYPTE. Just to update members, the parliamentary order to actually make that dissolution happen is now passed into law. It was week before last, so SYPTE will be dissolved with effect from the 1st of April. So this report is really to reflect that dissolution and the changes to the constitution required. So the functions, liabilities and assets of SIPT will move over to the MCA, and the constitution needs updating to reflect that. The report also picks up one or two other small tidying up issues, such as the change of name and status of Doncaster to City of Doncaster. So really open to members for any questions, if not to approve the changes required.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? All right, brilliant, thank you. In which case we approve the amendment to the Constitution with effect from 1st of April 2023 to reflect the dissolution of SIPTI. All agreed? Fab. Thank you very much. On to item number 13, please. The assurance framework from Gareth. Summarise the paper summarises the key amendments that are proposed, incorporated into the 2023 assurance framework, with a supporting slide deck setting out the proposed revisions for endorsements by the MCA board. Gareth, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So each year the MCA is required to adopt an assurance framework. The assurance framework sets out how we make decisions, and is a key tenet of our devolution deal with government, simply expressing how we will be a good custodian of funding and powers. So this year we've reviewed the assurance framework through the lens of trying to identify whether we've got the balance right between the rigour of our investment appraisal processes and the speed at which we can make those processes come into effect. We've identified several opportunities to increase the efficiency of processes by removing touch points into the MCA and placing more reliance on local authority processes. So we present to you today a set of assurance processes that we've engaged local authority colleagues on, which we're hopeful will speed up the pace at which we can invest into South Yorkshire. So I'm happy to endorse these processes to the board.
Any comments or questions for Gareth? Everyone happy? Okay, great, thank you. In which case, the MCA board notes at section 2.1 the proposed amendments to the assurance framework to ensure compliance with the government's requirements and most recent issued guidance. Members discuss and agree any further changes they would like to make to the governance, funding approvals or decision-making arrangements from 1st of April 2023. And consider and agree the draft assurance framework in Appendix A for onward publication and submission to the relevant government departments. We all agreed? Bro, okay, fantastic, thank you. In which case, on to item number 14, please, from Gareth.
Thank you again. Today we've got a really packed programme approvals paper, which is testament to the hard work of officers across the region and within the MCA to progress a number of investment schemes. So we're looking to progress 12 capital schemes through this report. In the book, we're asking for board to approval entry into contract for schemes in Rotherham, Sheffield and Barnsley, and the progression of one scheme from SBC to OBC. So that progression allows us to continue to work up that opportunity. We're also seeking approval from the board to delegate a number of decisions to the thematic boards, and this simply represents that we have a relatively early meeting this time in March, and we won't see you again until June. So there are a number of decisions that we're looking to progress within the timescale between now and the end of the financial year, and that requires delegation to the thematic boards. And that includes schemes in Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield, and a number of business investment opportunities. Finally, the report is seeking approval for the distribution of transport maintenance monies and also multiplier monies. So I'm very happy to commend this report to the board.
Any comments or questions for Gareth? I think, well, in which case I will just say, you know, sometimes it feels a bit gloomy, doesn't it, in South Yorkshire in terms of what we are or aren't doing and things that are happening at national level as well. And then we come to these meetings and sometimes I think we gloss over these assurance programme approvals, and don't take note of just how significant some of these schemes are and the influence and impact that we're having on the community. So some of these things that I think are genuinely important and impactful and will be for our communities, not least the active travel package in Rotherham Town Centre, the work on Marketgate Bridge in Barnsley, and obviously the work at the waterfront in Doncaster. So I think I'm really excited by some of these projects, and it's great to see that they're coming through the process, and we'll look forward to seeing them being developed in due course. Okay, in which case, do I have to read these all out? Okay, all right. In which case, bear with me. That the MCA board approved the following schemes and grant delegated authority to the head of paid service in consultation with Section 73 and monitoring officer to enter into legal agreements for A, progression of Rotherham Town Centre active travel package, Sheffield Road phases 1 to 3, full business case to full approval and award of £8.6 million grant to Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council subject to the conditions set out in Appendix A. B, progression of Cllr active travel and public transport from full business case to full approval and award of up to £16.05 million to Sheffield City Council subject to the conditions set out in the assurance summary attached to Appendix B. C, progression of A631 Rotherham to Maltby Bus Corridor from full business case to full approval and award of £2.55 million to Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, subject to the conditions set in insurance summary attached in Appendix C. D. Progression of electric community transport minibus project from full business case to full approval and award of £1.4 million to South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, subject to the conditions set out in insurance summary attached at Appendix D. E. Progression of Markegate Bridge from full business case to full approval and award of £2.5 million to Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council, subject to the conditions set out in insurance summary attached at Appendix E. F. Progression of AMRC Highcoms from SBC to OBC, subject to the conditions set in insurance summary attached to Appendix F. Delegate authority for the approval of the proposals for the following schemes to the head of paid service in consultation with either the relevant thematic board or, in the absence of a thematic board due to timing, the co-chairs of such boards. A. Progression of Rotherham Markets and Libraries from full business case to full approval and award of £3.4 million for Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council. B. Progression of West Bar from FBC to full approval and award of £3 million to Sheffield City Council. Progression of Doncaster Waterfront from FBC to full approval and award of £6.5 million to Doncaster City Council. And then 3. Allocation of Transport Network Asset Maintenance and Local and Neighbourhood Transparency Complementary Programme funding as detailed in paragraph 2. 4. Allocation of multiply funding as detailed in paragraph 3. I take it I don't need to read these. No. Fab. These two. Item number 2, D and E, progression of D0049 from full business case to full approval and award of £7 million loans to, and then E, progression of D0060 from full business case to full approval and award of £1.5 million equity funding. If it, does everybody want me to read those again at any point, feel free. Yeah. Are we all agreed? Any objections? No. Fab. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. In which case we're agreed. Item number 15, please. Transport update from John Dowie. Budgets.
Thank you, Mayor. If that was the positive, which it was, part of the agenda, I'm now taking us on to a more challenging part of the agenda. So the purpose of this paper is to update on the prognosis for a key part of our activity, transport spend. The underlying problem is that the Department for Transport is now heavily overextended in terms of its commitments and facing very substantial cost inflation as a result of construction, but also particularly because it's being pressured by Treasury to absorb HS2 cost increases, which are very, very substantial. That is putting the squeeze on a range of spend, much of which is very critical to the future development of this region. So DFT is kicking into the long grass decisions on high-speed rail on the east side. You'll have picked up media speculation about possible cuts to existing commitments on that side. It's very difficult to have a discussion about rail investment, given the uncertainties, suggestions of a 10% cut to the train operating company franchises, services. The key Doncaster A1M bypass is being called into question because of lack of money on that side. Now, clearly this is a very challenging situation, so we are working hard to lobby the government delivery agencies and lobby government directly, and the Mayor is seeing DFT ministers on the rail and non-rail sides later this month to put forward the key needs in terms of South Yorkshire. So we are actively seeking to address, but it's important to recognise the scale of the challenge. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for John Ross?
Simply to raise again with government the blighting of areas within Doncaster, and of course the whole of the village virtually of Mexborough is blighted, along other routes as well. So as soon as we get knowledge, we need that blighting lifted as soon as possible, because otherwise it is just damning a whole area within the borough.
Yep. Yeah, for what it's worth, completely agree.
And the other thing's got to be about the East Coast Main Line and the importance that plays to the whole of South Yorkshire and beyond. Therefore, we've got to lobby intensively to get all the work done that's needed on the East Coast Main Line also.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? No. in which case we note the update from John. Thank you. Item number 17 is mine, and I'm grateful for the indulgence that you've allowed me with this paper. This is a paper to note my 1 year in office, or the upcoming anniversary of my election last year. Wanted to bring this paper to this meeting on the basis that there won't be another MCA meeting before May 9th, so I wanted just to take this opportunity to just talk a little bit about what's been happening within the MCA over the last 12 months, both for the benefit of colleagues but also for the wider public. I think it's probably fair to say that it has been a difficult year in which to take office. The UK's seen 3 Prime Ministers, 3 major cabinet shake-ups, and when it comes to housing ministers, 5 portfolio holders since the summer. So in terms of the national context and the kind of economic and social chaos that some of that has created, it has not been easy. And then of course, within South Yorkshire, we've seen no shortage of challenges as well, not least obviously the impact of Doncaster Sheffield Airport being closed down by Peel, and as a result of changes from bus operators, a loss of about 15% of bus miles since October as well. So there have been a number of challenges to both our country and particularly our region since I took office in May. We've also seen South Yorkshire lose out when it comes to some of the big government funds that have been announced in that time, not least obviously BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan money that South Yorkshire bid for, £474 million of funding that we asked for, and with the largest, most populous region in the country not to receive a single penny of that money which in other regions has been put to making permanent things like the £2 bus cap and other improvements to bus services, improvements that we desperately need, and yet we're forced into competition to try and get equally on levelling up funding which was supposed to support the government's levelling up agenda and their intentions to deliver London-style transport systems across the country, not least here in places like South Yorkshire. We bid for £37 million of that money to provide on-demand transport services in the region, and again didn't receive a single penny. So it has not been an easy time for South Yorkshire when it comes to government funding either, amidst all the chaos. So I recognise the challenges, but despite those challenges, I think we've managed to do a lot in the last 10 months, not least I was elected on a promise to fix public transport in South Yorkshire, to create not just a bigger economy but a better economy in South Yorkshire, to make us the healthiest region in the country, a challenge which I understand the scale of, get us to net zero and do politics differently, all of which are incredibly important to me in terms of what I do both day to day, week in, week out, and we'll be doing over the next hopefully 3 years. I think we've had some notable successes in that time on all of those agendas. Public transport, as I've already said, is not an easy space for South Yorkshire. We all know the challenges when it comes to buses in particular. We've heard earlier some of the challenges of getting to profitability with the tram when we take it back into public ownership. But we are, I think, progressing on an ambitious agenda for public transport, not least next March, bringing the tram back into public control and public ownership, moving forward at pace with our plans to make a decision on public control of public transport in South Yorkshire, a decision which in my mind can't come soon enough. When it comes to creating a bigger and better economy, what we've already heard from Tom earlier is key kind of part of that plan to create that bigger and better economy, working to deliver the innovation corridor that we've talked about, saving working wind, which has been a kind of under-noted part of what we've done. I think over recent weeks the government were minded to shut down Working Win, a really important programme in South Yorkshire, but we did manage to lobby the government successfully to save that programme. And then obviously the work that we're doing on things like the ownership hub as well, all important parts of our plans for South Yorkshire's economy. When it comes to the healthiest region in the country, making South Yorkshire healthier, addressing what are frankly immoral and awful health inequalities across the region, we're making great strides in that region. We've got a paper coming up, so I won't jump the gun on that paper, but suffice to say, I think we're making significant progress. I've become the chair of the Integrated Care Partnership, the only mayor in the country to have taken on that role. Really proud to have done that, and able through that role to join up services across South Yorkshire in a way that hasn't happened before, so really pleased about that. Equally on net zero, certainly I would think about the things we've been doing with Ed Clancy, our new Active Travel Commissioner, three-time Olympic gold medalist, 6-time World Championship medalist, 5-time European Championship medalist from Barnsley, who will help us achieve our active travel ambitions. We're going to be launching our climate assembly in the not too distant future, and a bunch of other things besides. That net zero promise is dear to my heart and absolutely fundamental to the type of economy and society that we want to create in South Yorkshire. And then last but not least, doing politics differently. Since I came into office, we've held mayor's question times across the country. I've been on Call Coppard on Radio Sheffield every month with Toby Foster. We've undertaken and are going through a process of reviewing the work of the MCA to make us both more transparent, accountable and more responsive to the needs of our communities, and we'll be doing much more besides. So I'm very proud of the work that we've put in across the region over the last 10 or 11 months. I think we're doing some big and important things. There's much more to do, of course, but I think we're making good progress. So I just wanted to be able to update colleagues and, like I say, the wider public on that progress, and commend the report to colleagues. I know that officers potentially had some additions to the paper. Is there anything you wanted to add that I've missed out that's fundamentally important?
I think just one or two. I think you covered most of it, Oliver, obviously, but the work that we've also done, investing over £50 million in skills training, and also the first tech summit that we held in Barnsley last year. Both of those interventions have contributed to South Yorkshire now being able to draw level with Greater Manchester and Liverpool City region in terms of its share of high growth sectors, which is really important, obviously, getting people into better jobs, contributing to better health outcomes, and I would also just point to the work that we've done with the local authorities again in investing over £50 million in town centre regeneration and flood mitigation measures.
Any comments or questions? Small round of applause, etc.
The one thing that we are failing to do is getting government here and getting government funding here, which is actually damning the whole of South Yorkshire and beyond. And therefore, we've got to find a way in order to bring that funding, because we are lagging behind other areas because of this. And it's about government funding not coming in and delivering for the people. I'll say the people of Doncaster, no, the people of South Yorkshire, and therefore we really do need to press ahead. I know that you've made comments about DSA, and we are pursuing that to actually show that this can be a real economic generator in the future. And we've got to actually ensure that we collectively get behind that to deliver for this area and beyond, because that is one area that will, in the future, will bring economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ros. I would love to be able to sit here and, albeit through gritted teeth, say that the government's levelling up agenda was delivering for South Yorkshire. I'd love to be able to say that. It would be difficult, but I would love to be able to say that, because it would be making a material difference to our communities. And yet the government have set out their 12 missions for levelling up, and within all of those, or most of those, apart from maybe I think the Healthy Life Expectancy Challenge, they set an ambition of 2030, the date by which they wanted to achieve those goals. And yet in South Yorkshire we receive rarely government support to do the things the government themselves say they want to do. So on public transport being the obvious one, 350-ish weeks to go until 2030, and yet in all too many areas across public transport in South Yorkshire we're going backwards because the government aren't stepping in to support us, a region that so desperately needs that support to achieve that levelling up mission. You're absolutely right about Doncaster Sheffield Airport. It will be burned on my brain that Liz Truss said she was going to step in and support us in our ambitions to save Doncaster Sheffield Airport, and yet, as you know as well as I do, did absolutely nothing in order to support Doncaster Sheffield Airport and the work that we were doing to save it at the time. So no, I would say that levelling up has been a sham, frankly, and yet we need support if we're going to achieve so many of those missions that we all desperately know are so important to our region. Any other comments or questions? No? Fantastic. All right, in which case, thank you. I think we just note the contents of the report, please. On to item number 18, Health Action Advisory Panel from Ruth. Thank you, Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we all know that we have a huge challenge around poor outcomes for health, low healthy life expectancy, high health inequalities, which the Mayor has already pointed out, and we know that's impacting on our economy and our public services. And despite all the assets we have, all the fantastic work that's happening across South Yorkshire, we're not really making a dent in that. So as part of the Mayor's personal ambition to make South Yorkshire the healthiest region, as part of his manifesto commitments, what we want to do is to bring together some expertise within South Yorkshire, including directors of public health, academic partners, the chair of the LEP, voluntary sector, NHS colleagues, and also some external partners to actually really look at what we could do differently, what we could scale up across South Yorkshire to really make a dent into some of those challenges we have. Professor Alan Walker from the Healthy Lifespan Institute has agreed to chair a group of people to pull that together as a task and finish group. And we would basically like the MCA board to support the work of that group and allow us to come back and share our recommendations that we have from that work that we've taken forward.
Ruth, is there anything else you want to say, Ruth? Ruth, is there anything else you wanted to?
No, that was it.
Any comments or questions about that work? I guess I should probably just say I was elected on that promise to address healthy life expectancy, health outcomes in South Yorkshire, make South Yorkshire the healthiest region in the country. And when I said that during the election campaign, there followed a number of meetings, hustings and all the rest of it, where I was challenged on that ambition. And I think it's fair to say the people that questioned me on that either thought that I didn't appreciate the scale of the challenge and had made that promise naively, or thought that I wasn't going to be committed to it when I came into office because it simply wasn't deliverable. And I'd like to think neither of those are true. I completely appreciate the scale of the challenge that we're taking on when we say that South Yorkshire should be the healthiest region in the country, not least taking that challenge on at this point when health inequalities within South Yorkshire are widening. It is a huge challenge to take on and generational challenge to take on. And I'd be very surprised if it was an outcome that we achieved during my time in office, but what it hopefully will do is set us on a path where we are able to at least address the most egregious effects of those health inequalities, help the people that need it the most, and get there in time to that healthiest region title. I'm sure they give you a medal or a cup or something at that point. I've said this before, but one of our colleagues, Stephen Pleasant, has used this phrase about admiring the problem. And what this is not is us admiring the problem in just a new different way, or from a different vantage point, or through the lens of me now being mayor. This isn't about just admiring the problem. This is about actually getting on and delivering changes to the way in which we deliver services in a more joined up way, particularly through my role as the chair of the ICP, but also kind of making sure that people are feeling the effects of that in their communities, in their lives, so we can actually help people, and that's the whole point. So yeah, I'm grateful for the work that's being done by Alan and others, and really pleased you could be here today, Alan. Thank you very much. I think this is fundamentally important, and I'm really pleased that we're headed down this path. So in terms of recommendations, could we please support the creation of the expert panel and agree to receive and engage with the findings and recommendations of that panel? Everybody agreed? Fantastic, brilliant, thank you very much. Agenda item number 19, please. Appointment of the independent member of the Audit, Standards and Risk Committee. Gareth.
Thank you, Mayor. This board is supported in its oversight of MCA affairs by an Audit, Standards and Risk Committee. The Risk Committee is constituted from elected members from across the region and also a cadre of independent members. This report is seeking authorisation to appoint Paul Schofield as our next independent member. Paul is a local government accountant with a long career in internal audit, so we're very happy to endorse this to the board. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? In which case, can we approve the appointment of Paul Schofield as an independent member of the Audit, Standards and Risk Committee? Everybody agreed? Wonderful, thank you. You shook your head there, Gareth, in a way that confused me. So disagreeing with your own paper. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Item number 20, Delegated Authority Report, please, Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the normal report that comes to MCA board and covers the decisions made under Delegated Authority from July 20 through to February 23. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? No, in which case we note the decisions and delegations made. All agreed. Brilliant, thank you. Item number 21, any other business? any other business members would like to raise? No, fab. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. In which case, date of the next meeting is Monday, the 5th of June, 2023, 10 a.m. here at 11 Broad Street West. Thank you, everybody.